Oh, it's spooky season time. Look at the mighty, boulder-punching, peanut-busting Chris Redfield watching his buddy Richard sleep innocently. For a hero, it can be pretty scary. Well, since it's spooky season, here's some pictures of me visiting the Evans City Cemetery, the birthplace of the zombie cinema for Romero's fantastic Night of the Living Dead, the birthplace of zombie modern horror. With all that in mind, I recently got to see these beautiful locations for Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, and even some replica props from Evil Dead 2. So, with all that horror galore, I got to experience some great buddies of mine and seeing Romero's statue and his great quotes of wisdom. We gotta celebrate Resident Evil. That's what I want to do today with this compilation, collecting 3 video essays of mine. That being the atmospheres of Resident Evil compared, Resident Evil's greatest trope, the rocket launcher, and lastly, the beauty of Resident Evil 6. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a franchise that Romero himself helped inspired. And let's celebrate Halloween, people. Enjoy. The threat of bioweapons is always a big deal. However, Chris Redfield is even bigger. And you know what else is big? The many enticing atmospheres of Resident Evil. Horror is more than just gruesome violence and cheap scares. It can be all about the ambience and vibe you get when exploring uncharted territory. And Resident Evil is all about that uncharted territory, since you gotta explore these places yourself and let your imagination guide you. For this video, I'll go over some of my favorite locations from throughout the series, and my commentary style. Sit back, relax, grab your green herbs and smoke them, and join me as I talk about Code Veronica, RE5, Revelations 2, and RE6 with a little bonus mention of Dino Crisis. First up, Code Veronica X. This game only has 2 major locations, that being Rockfort Island and then the Umbrella Antarctic Base. Don't worry though, because both these locations are filled with distinct areas, and you get to backtrack them as the peanut buster Chris Redfield himself. The atmosphere and music for Code Veronica X is simply incredible. This is the only entry on this video where I'll have to use other footage since I had it on my PS2, and of course, capturing cutscenes from the other games, yada yada. Whenever I think of Code Veronica, I think about that ominous long staircase that seems to go up forever, as Claire gradually sees more of that giant, deteriorated hanging doll in Alexia Ashford's castle. The musical piece that accompanies this scene is amazing, a nice blend of uncanny and classical as the fixed camera inches upwards the more you progress. There's one thing that made Code Veronica distinct from past RE games. It's that the fixed camera isn't so fixed as it can pan depending on the room, and if you're going up or down, much like Dino Crisis at times. This feature helps build the tension since the lighting in Code Veronica can be much darker than its predecessors. That giant doll says a lot about the mind of the Ashford twins and how they are unnatural themselves since they're, clones. Keep in mind that the Minton hanging doll, since there's a homage to it in another Claire game we'll talk about later in this video. The Ashford Castle on Rockfort Island is technically the first castle we visit in the series, but it still stands on its own with the puzzles and how it's surprisingly not in complete disarray despite all the bioweapons lurking around. There's that playroom with the ant puzzle and music box that is hauntingly alluring as well. Then you get the more industrial, military-themed areas of Code Veronica. The entirety of Rockfort Island is full of open and closed spaces to explore, with the darkness of night hiding danger at seemingly every corner. Giant worms, zombies, dogs, albinoids, the masturbator, one-handed tyrants, and of course, Big Daddy Albert Wesker. Oh, and the Mr. Nubs tyrant is there too. This, along with the already deserted Antarctic base, create a feeling of isolation since these facilities full of military soldiers straight up got wiped out, and now you're facing their undead remains. I mean, for crying out loud, Claire is like a college student and she's surviving all this. What a beast. There's something about being stranded in the blistering cold of a desolate continent in that Antarctic base that brings a whole nother level of fear into Resident Evil. And sure, there's still a Spencer Mansion clone in this game. Somehow, even Mr. Trevor made one for the Antarctic base, but the fact that the Umbrella Antarctic base is hiding so many dark secrets adds to the mystery of evil hiding beneath all the snow and ice. It's like it's just waiting to be unleashed. When it comes to the enemies of the Antarctic base, however, it's full of the worst hunters in the series, as there's poison ones as well, but you can't really tell because of how dark it is, and they have those little robot drones that tell the hunters where to attack. Giant groping plant vines, Mothra's unwanted babies, and giant goddamn spiders that made me wish Godzilla himself was there to nuke it. Oh, and Nosferatu is here too, but he's not flickering the lights this time. Nosferatu is just a mutated Edward Ashford. I gotta say, finally seeing an Umbrella founder in the undead flesh was pretty cool. I bring up all the enemies because besides the bosses, they do respawn for the most part, which makes the survival and atmosphere of Code Veronica that much more fascinating. Now let's move on from the freezing temperatures and into the fiery savanna of Africa and buried civilizations in Resident Evil 5. And Big Daddy Albert Wesker is here too, of course. If I had to describe Resident Evil 5's atmosphere and style, it's a fine wine mix of Temple of Doom that met the love child of Black Hawk Down and Terminator Salvation. It's got that just wartime tint to it, and of course a bunch of treasure to be found in the underground parts. RE5 is action-packed, but still a horror story since, well, war itself is horror. I mean, you gotta remember that the bioweapons in this franchise were originally designed for war. It was just that original trilogy era where Umbrella's plans were foiled due to infighting and egos from their own personnel. With that in mind, the more warlike approach, so to speak, to RE5 isn't mutually exclusive to more quieter moments. I think the quote-unquote mansion reveal moment for this game is where Chris and Sheva first enter the opening of the buried kingdom of the Nidpaya. Sorry if I mispronounced that. You feel like you're being watched every second in these ruins of that ancient kingdom. Now, from here in this kingdom, there's a labyrinth of plaga foes, death traps, memories lost to the aging of time, and the hidden origin of the progenitor virus itself. Just look at how Chrissy Poo here refers to the progenitor virus. Keeping in mind with the wartime theme, the horror that comes with that also pairs with tragedy, exploring the infected ruins of the modern-day Nipaya tribe's villages is tragic since so much life was lost here, as well as for the people in Kijuju and the neighboring cities. It makes the build-up to battling Wesker and Trisol that much better, as well as saving Jill. The chaotic atmosphere of Kijuju is such a thrill ride of adrenaline and panic, as there's multiple times you can be swarmed by hostiles and separated from your partner. That same feeling extends to the oil factory and the mines. Then there's the marshlands, which brings us to a quieter, more reserved atmosphere, but you still feel like you're being watched. That section where Chris and Sheva have to take the boat around the swamp is one of my favorites. It's a one-and-done segment, but it builds off of the lake in RE4 quite nicely and lets you remember that the setting is in the wildlands of Africa. Now, the Tricell ship that the final act of RE5 takes place on before the volcano may forego the African setting for a ship, since it feels like RE games take place on more ships than mansions, but I see that Tricell ship as the quote-unquote laboratory part of the game. It's more cramped, enemies are tougher, and the setting you're accustomed to in the major parts of the game are now gone. And hell, the ship gave us this badass Chris Redfield line that reaffirmed why we love him. Every man should want to be a captain of his own ship, huh? I also want to bring up the atmospheres of RE5's kick-ass bonus campaigns. The first being Desperate Escape, where we get the legendary Josh Stone and MILF Valentine herself, the lockpick master, battling through the hardest elements of RE5's campaign, but on virus-infused steroids. Like, playing Desperate Escape on the hardest difficulty is a true beast of its own. I found this cool secret area in Desperate Escape and towards the beginning part that is easy to miss if you backtrack during the first part of the canyon battle. The war-torn vibe of RE5 is to the max here, and it's fun going through it two-player. Then we get more of MILF Valentine and the Lost in Nightmares campaign. I'll just describe the atmosphere here like this. We get a wonderful love letter to RE1's Spencer Mansion, complete with a stellar fixed camera reference if you interact with the front door a couple times. The fact they included that along with the other homages is icing on the cake, and Resident Evil is known for cake. Lost in Nightmares also has these claustrophobic tunnels underneath where you battle the Executioner clones, except all of your weapons are removed. It's hectic, dangerous, and so much fun in co-op, since it's essentially a giant puzzle in order to win. And it feels like that one tunnel section with Lisa Trevor at RE1, although this time both Chris and Jill get to work together in tandem. Before I move on to the next entry, I gotta add that the main menu theme for RE5 is phenomenal, and evokes a feeling of history in the franchise since so much has been building up to this game, and the music is mysterious as much as it lures you in to battle the challenges in the game. Good stuff. Next, let's talk about Revelations 2 with Claire and Barry Burton battling She-Wesker and a bunch of ex-Soviets. This game takes a more brutal approach up front with its gore. All the enemies are visibly disfigured and generally look like nightmares that walked out of experiments done in a dangerous, dastardly prison. This one takes place before RE6, so instead of having bioweapons that look like they're ready for mass warfare, the bioweapons in Revelations 2 look stitched together and hell-bent on rageful chaos. That, along with the stranded feel of Sea and Island's decayed settlement, is truly unique in the series. From the prison, to the villages, the sewers, the factory, the mines, and to that dark forest that seemingly never ends, the setting of Rev 2 is like a distant memory or dream you can't remember fully. And with the structure of the game's plot, that being the 6-month time difference between Claire and Barry's episodes, this might be one of the longest affected settings in the franchise. You can really feel that time passing when going through the derelict city as Barry and Natalia. It's cold, desolate, and genuinely feels haunted. That idea of a distant memory fits the atmosphere of the game and that gigantic tower looming over everything on the island. However, by the time you're playing as those two, the tower's top half has been destroyed, which really makes you wonder what happened during Claire's campaign. I described Sea Island as if Raccoon City was never bombed. This place that was once abundant with people is now no longer a war zone. It's just empty remains of a place that once was. That in of itself is a different kind of horror, a more psychological one that fits with Rev 2's themes of Franz Kafka's work. Going around the game and finding blue imprints of Kafka's actual sketches make you feel like you're losing your own mind. So, Revelations 2 has one area in particular that homages the scene from Code Veronica. Remember that eerie hanging doll I mentioned earlier? Well, during the entrance to Alex Wesker's tower as Barry, you stumble across demented notes and equally demented, bloody, and dismembered dolls hanging around for it feels like forever. A similar scene happens later on right before the final battle, but it's not only terrifying set dressing, but it also shows how insane Alex Wesker is. She may not be as memorable as the Albert Wesker we all know, although I'd say she was equally as screwed up. Revelations 2 may not have the sweeping detective show plot or the intense scale of the first Revelations game, however it carves up its own identity by allowing us to visit another nightmare as classic characters with a fresh perspective and cool gameplay. And revisiting classic characters is what makes Resident Evil appealing for me. Now let's talk about my personal favorite in the series, RE6. The art style in this game still has that video gaming look to it, while not looking too realistic, which is how I like my games. It has style. That ties into the atmosphere of RE6, because with the 4 campaigns in mind, it truly feels like you're uncovering a web of plot, a large plot, through multiple perspectives, aka playthroughs. Plus, the threat of bioweapons feels larger than ever because these freaks of nature are now deliberate weapons built for warfare like their original intention. However, this time they have qualities from almost every previous virus in the franchise. With that in mind, going from the hectic chaos of Tall Oaks in California to the absolute winter warfare of Adonia, and to the horrific final battle in Lanxing, China, is a Resident Evil experience like none other, and truly feels like a love letter to all the previous entries in the series when looked at as a whole. I discussed more about RE6 and my Beauty of RE6 story and style video from last year, so I'll stay on track of just the atmosphere for this video. RE6 has a dreamy aesthetic to it with its art style that has really aged well, and is full of exuberant, vibrant colors complemented by gut-rushing music. It really feels like for once in the franchise the apocalypse might actually occur, and unraveling Carla Rodami's plot against the world makes for an adventure so big that it incorporates several unique atmospheres. The secret facility in that mansion in Lanxing is a real highlight. When you break out of containment as Mr. Jake, you're met with a labyrinth of white sanitized walls and blinding lights and a medical facility that's clearly made only for a bioweapon enhancement. And I gotta say, after playing the first Dino Crisis, there's a few parts of it that reminded me of this facility in RE6, including some of the more industrial areas later on in Dino Crisis that you kinda see in that big lava facility in RE6 later on. Dino Crisis is another one that has great atmosphere, and here in RE6 you even get to fight a few dinosaur-inspired enemies. Would you look at that? Moving on, this facility turns out to be connected to a mansion I assume Carla herself was using as headquarters. This is some classic RE stuff right here, as you navigate the walls with wonderfully unique and sometimes eerie architecture while having to solve puzzles and dodge enemies. I'll just let the scenery of this mansion play for itself. Gorgeous stuff, huh? Gorgeous stuff, huh? This extends to the rest of Lanxing as a city where you feel overwhelmed by enemies, or sometimes the more reserved and quiet moments can catch you off guard. Battling through the street market as Leon feels like a classic cramped area with foes you can't just destroy easily. It's like a maze in of itself. Then as Chris, that battle with the giant snake throughout the apartments has so much verticality to it that it feels fresh to replay every time. And witnessing Chris lose yet another team to a bioweapon makes you want to get to the bottom of everything as much as Chris himself does. Then when playing as Ada or Jake, you get to encounter each other on the river battle with the sinking restaurant on a ship. Here you get to admire the skyline of a city based off of Hong Kong, while also seeing just how much sheer destruction has been caused by the C virus. One of the most terrifying moments in all of Resident Evil is seeing that C virus warhead hit the city as tens of thousands are tragically infected as blue dust overwhelms the streets. Whether you're playing as Leon and having to navigate the infected chaos on ground, or playing as Ada in the chopper and seeing the chaos from a bird's-eye view, it's such a gnarly and horrific event in the series. And I'd say that RE6 is full of moments like that. You see it in Tall Oaks as well, which is pretty much Raccoon City 2.0. Then that entire battle across Adonia, it comes across as insanely destructive since Carla was using that civil war as just a means to find Jake. The quiet moments of the Simmons family catacombs or the outskirts of Adonia in the snow feel endless in such an unnerving way, as you're just surrounded by darkness and who knows what's out there looking around. If you haven't already, I'd advise replaying RE6 in the lens of a big celebration of all things Resident Evil. And I do want to bring up the main menu theme of RE6. It feels ominous, and like something is just about to creep up and overtake you in its madness. And that kind of fits the plot of the game and the aesthetic of the main menu, that dark purple of all the webs, like you're uncovering that giant plot through the lens of multiple characters. And I even say that all the other menu themes for RE6's other modes are a lot of fun too. They take on more vibrant and energetic vibes, but still, just the main menu itself is such a great theme. Well, that about wraps up this video. Thank you guys for watching, and be sure to let me know your favorite atmospheres from across the Resident Evil series. I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Until next time, be sure to check out my other Resident Evil videos. I think you like them. I put a lot of heart into them. Until then, take care, make sure to save, and I've been Mr. Tiger Drop Films. I'll see ya in the next one.
Thanks.
Come on!
Okay, thanks. Go, 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 go. Come on, come on. Wait, thanks.
Thanks. Thanks. Thanks. Thanks. Thanks. Come on! Wait! Wait! Go! Go! Thanks.
Where are we supposed to put this? I don't have no space. Resident Evil's best trope, the rocket launcher. Whenever you've had it with whatever evil has been tormenting you this entire time, the cure you might need is a big boom boom rocket. A rocket launcher, that is. Throughout the many iterations of Resident Evil, you can almost always find a rocket launcher, being the final killing blow to whatever final boss you're fighting. Today, let's dive into some of the rocket launchers in the franchise and why it stuck out as an equally badass and goofy trope for Resident Evil. Just please don't do anything risky every time I say rocket launcher in this video. Dating back to the original game and its respective remake, both Chris and Jill's campaigns ended through taking out the fabled herald to the T-Virus, the Tyrant, with a big tank-busting rocket launcher. I like that STARS had access to a ridiculous military-grade rocket launcher. I bet Wesker planted that just for his combat data, even if his monster baby turned against him. Good on Chris for laughing at that. Then in Resident Evil 2, the rocket launcher returns to help Leon and Claire dispel the pesky Mr. X in his super tyrant form. One detail I like about the original is that Leon and Claire have one-liners right before destroying Mr. X. One-liners go a long way, man.
Game over.
You lose, big guy.
Once we get to Resident Evil 3, the tables have turned dramatically. What if a tyrant had a rocket launcher? Enter the legendary Nemesis, who's armed and ready to take names by blasting STARS away with his rocket launchers. In the original, he'll just toss away his current rocket launcher whenever it's out of ammo, and return the punching Jill. Since Nemesis is the one boasting his New Game Plus rocket launcher, in the climactic final battle, the developers just had to switch it up this time. If there's one thing about tropes and traditions, it's the nature of them evolving alongside each new entry. Enter a massive rail gun, perfect for decimating mutating stalkers. We then see a return to a one-liner of Jill's classic rebuttal to defeating Nemesis once and for all.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
By the time Code Veronica and its other editions released, Resident Evil had been an established franchise. It's been a little bit since the original trilogy, so now you have an established fanbase, lore, and developers wanting to mix things up. During my original run of Code Veronica X on the PS2, I made it to the final fight with Alexia, except I hit a roadblock. Code Veronica is a different beast from other Resident Evil fixed camera games, and the item box is one of those. By the time I got to Chris, I had no idea I couldn't switch over items with Claire, so I was stuck with a pistol and shotgun to deal with the relentless mutated Alexia. Because this whole time I thought I was going to be able to have a chance like one of those before you enter the final fight. The game will let you, give the weapons to the character that has to finish the game, but alas, I was dumb and I just couldn't see into the future. I checked online and wouldn't you know, a rocket launcher was still the solution for this mutated Alexia in some way. During my feeble attempts at the boss fight, I could only stare at the charging plasma launcher behind its glass case as I got my ass kicked, but seeing footage of the thing in action online looks amazing. So, you're in an Antarctic umbrella base of pure evil in the freezing cold, Sub-Zero, created by one of the original Umbrella founders, so of course you'd find a super realistic rocket launcher. It's poetry somehow.
Here and now!
Then let's do this!
Then we get to Resident Evil 4, and it's been almost a decade since the original Resident Evil released. There's been some other random spin-offs putting their twist on series tropes, and now we have Resident Evil 4, which is technically Resident Evil 5 because of Code Veronica. But franchises never like to make naming easy. Anyway, the game's weapon of choice to finish Big Boss Sadler is an RPG with a red missile. It may be a mere palette swap, although it fits the aesthetics of the game and harkens back to Resident Evil 2 with Leon waiting on Ada to drop him the final boss weapon. This rocket launcher is notable since it culminates both the main campaign and separate ways. Because in separate ways you have to play as Ada and give him the rocket launcher from high above and all that construction area in the final battle. Nonetheless, Sadler couldn't escape the Hollywood cliches as blown to smithereens by the sickest Resident Evil cliche imaginable. Now, Resident Evil 4 gets bonus points in terms of rocket launchers because on my second New Game Plus playthrough, I finally realized that if you buy a rocket launcher from the merchant right before you fight Salazar's right-hand man, that one Verdugo, if you freeze it and then you use your rocket launcher on it, you can actually get a really unique and special treasure from its corpse. It's even a trophy in modern ports of the original game. Go try it out for yourself. Jump forward to Resident Evil 5 and we get double the rocket launchers to take down Freaky Wesker. Although if you jump back a bit in the very same game, there's a cool orbital cannon beam thing used on the gigantic Ouroboros on the ship boss fight. In terms of the final Wesker fight, I think Wesker getting taken down by dual rocket launchers while in a volcano screaming "Chris!" while Chris tells him to suck it is a pure masterpiece. But no. Yeah, in most of these games you can purchase or unlock some form of a rocket launcher to use during your everyday gameplay, like on a New Game Plus, so to speak, and that's always a spectacle. It's like going full commando as Schwarzenegger. I always find the climactic use of these big boom booms to be a real highlight in most of these games.
Chris, Shepard! Use those!
Partner?
Locked and loaded.
Suck on this, Wesker.
Your time's up, you son of a bitch.
This takes me to Resident Evil 6, where with 4 campaigns you're bound to find different ways to defeat these wicked villains that don't involve a rocket launcher. For Derek Simmons, however, he got the rocket launcher special. During Ada's campaign, she leaves a classic RPG with a lipstick kiss on the missile, just for Leon, and so he uses a love rocket to blast away Simmons in his final form, and send him barreling down to one of the greatest villain deaths I've ever seen next to Wesker's himself. Simmons devolves back to his human form and is impaled on a gigantic umbrella statue, where his blood trickles down and fills in the red canopy parts of that classic umbrella color scheme. Part spectacle, part homage, all concluding. We're not done yet, however. Let's wrap up with the two Revelations games. Although I do want to step back and highlight that the way the Queen Leech is defeated with a Magnum in Resident Evil 0 is partly referenced with Usanak's final death in Resident Evil 6, since they both get taken out by a Magnum and fall into a gigantic corridor full of fire. Alright. Revelations 1 has Jill use a rocket launcher given to her by BSAA pilot Kirk to defeat the gigantic Malakota by sending a rocket right down its throat. It reminds me a bit of the way Godzilla defeats Orga in Godzilla 2000 just by the Malakota's design looking a bit similar to Orga's face. Even though the Malakota was the penultimate boss of this game, I'm still glad that this classic tradition made it in some way.
Treat a girl, Kirk!
Aim for its mouth!
Now we've made it to the finale. Revelations 2 is a game that finally lets Claire use the rocket for the first time in a billion years, where she provides air cover for good old Barry during the final fight with Alex Wesker. What I enjoy about this finale is how it actually lets you switch playable characters during the fight, even if it's a bit scripted, as it truly makes the game's story feel like it's culminating to a great finale. Barry has to run around and hold off Wesker, while Claire uses a sniper to damage her. Then once you get far enough, it's time to finish off the Wesker bloodline and Umbrella's bratty freaks of nature with a classic rocket. If there's one thing viruses seem to be weak to, it's not just antibiotics or cures, it's goddamn explosions. So, that's practically all the major uses of this favorite trope of mine I can recall at the moment. For a series about horror, it's also one that understands why action and horror are not mutually exclusive, but rather just genres that can elevate each other. For all these games start off a bit slow to get you used to the vibe and controls, then by the time the finale rolls around, it's time for you to stop running and start kicking evil's ass. Rockets are violent, although they're great when evil gets to be too much and you got a one-liner to get off your chest. I've been Mr. Tiger Drop Films, or Mr. TDF, and thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Resident Evil tropes are, and be sure to share this video with your fellow evil residents. Until next time, peace.
So easy. That a mission so easy.
Hey there. Today at Tiger Drop Films, I'm going to tell you why I find Resident Evil 6 to be the ultimate Resident Evil experience. So grab your green herbs and your favorite weapon, and let's get into it. Now, Resident Evil 6 is no stranger to already having a fan base backing it up. So that's why for this video I'm just going to give you my own perspective on this game. You see, last year I really delved into the Resident Evil series, from the first game all the way to Resident Evil 6, and that also includes Code Veronica and Revelations, games I've already talked about on this channel in my last 2 Resident Evil videos. However, with that being said, I was always familiar with Resident Evil as a franchise growing up, from other crossover video games to the Anderson films. Oh man, I remember watching the Retribution film as a kid and being exposed to Jill Valentine and Ada Wong. Oh, ruined my life in the best way, but here we are today. Resident Evil is the embodiment of so many film franchises I love, from Alien to Predator to Terminator and Evil Dead, among so many others. And playing so many of these games back to back really sold why I love action and horror. And I think action and horror are two ideas that are synonymous and can bleed into each other and vice versa. I mean, Resident Evil is a franchise that can go from being about zombies to warfare and to Jurassic Park. If that isn't versatile, then I don't know what is. Now, Resident Evil 6 happens to share the same writer as Resident Evil Damnation, my favorite animated film of the bunch, that writer being Shotaro Suga. And let me tell you, I really adore his writing. The characters just seem to be brought to life in such a new way that does come across as organic, and they also got a nice punch to them that I really like. And so you truly see that in Resident Evil 6. From the new characters to returning characters, they all seem so lively while also dealing with some kind of new struggle. And additionally, I really like how Resident Evil 6 is able to bring together so many factors from the franchise. And like I said, since I played a lot of these games during my free time last year, what I really appreciated of Resident Evil 6 was how it used fan service in all the right ways. Especially when considering that Resident Evil 6 combined the zombie era of the classic games with the more plaga-based enemies of 4 and 5, with the zombies in RE6, and then we had the Java, which basically function as your Ganados and Mugini. There's even a shark and snake fight in this game. What a great homage to the first game. So it really becomes sort of a greatest hits of Resident Evil, while at the same time putting their own spin on these classic enemies. And what I mean is that it wasn't just to toggle your remember berries, no, it was a way of just showing why this franchise is so beloved, from Ustanak being a great Nemesis homage, to the kids of Wesker and Birkin being able to save the world, unlike their parents who tried to destroy it in some way. And damn it, Resident Evil 6 actually let us fly a jet as Chris Redfield. I mean, you gotta remember, Chris Redfield was once in the Air Force, so when I found out that while playing this game, Chris Redfield was able to fly a jet, it just, made me grin like an idiot. It was so awesome. It also happened to be a nice little callback to Code Veronica as well. And so if you see what I mean with these examples, I adore that Resident Evil 6's story is able to bring together so many cool aspects of the franchise. I mean, another example is how during Leon's campaign, you can come across an officer complaining about this being his first day on the job while there's a zombie outbreak going on. And across the street, there's even a Stagla gas station referencing Resident Evil 3. I mean, the fan service is everywhere, and it's done with such love and dignity. It doesn't make you roll your eyes. Instead, it makes you just grin like an idiot. At least that's what it did for me, and I really appreciated that. And speaking of grinning like an idiot, I adore this game's style. The purple text and the spider webs, and the overall dreamy feel to the game. If I had to compare its art style to another game from the same year, well, it'd have to be Yakuza 5, one of my favorites of the Yakuza series. And if you're familiar with my channel, you know I love talking about Yakuza every chance I get. And speaking of Yakuza 5, I adored how RE6 is about 4 campaigns coming together as you unravel the spider web and finding out new details about the narrative. And when it comes to the narrative, I was genuinely surprised to see how much it actually challenged its characters. From Leon's main antagonist being the guy who ordered the bombing of Raccoon City, I mean, I did not expect that. And while its more so details are kind of in the background, being able to punch Simmons in the face is pretty satisfying if you followed Leon from his beginning to here. And when it comes to Chris Redfield, I really liked his journey of overcoming his amnesia and trauma and just trying to do the right thing. However, Piers being a sort of mirror of a young Chris, having to bring our Chris back to who he's supposed to be, was really endearing. And it's such a simple concept that I really gravitated towards. And of course, it ends with Chris having to fight another world-destroying foe in a crazy laboratory. I mean, if you followed Chris Redfield, I do think there's a nice little trilogy that pays off with Resident Evil 6. That being if you consider Revelations and how he helped build the BSAA, to RE5 being his climactic battle against Big Daddy Albert Wesker. Then here in RE6 he goes through a slight bit of a reset as he's now at his lowest point. But of course we get to see our boulder punching, peanut busting, loving Chris Redfield rise back to the top and take out House at the bottom of the sea, even if it tragically meant losing Piers. And I was really surprised to see that Piers sacrificed himself. It really made House seem like such a dangerous global threat. And I do think that having a protagonist die every now and then does kind of keep things fresh. And I'm glad that they did not kill off Chris Redfield. I know that was a plan for the game originally, and of course, I already saw memes and whatnot about RE7 and 8, so I knew Chris was going to come back. But when looking at this game in hindsight, as a guy who's really become such an avid Resident Evil fan, I really liked Chris Redfield's story. I thought it was engaging, and I just loved how the game's narrative did not diminish Chris at all as a character. If anything, Piers was such a great supporting character that he really was able to bring Chris back to life, back to who he's supposed to be. And of course, Roger Craig Smith's performance is stellar, and it made me a little sad that this was pretty much his last performance as Chris, besides the Marvel vs. Capcom games, because his voice is just what I think of whenever I think about Chris Redfield. And when it comes to Jake and Sherry's campaign, I was pleasantly surprised to enjoy Jake so much. He's so charismatic and he really grows on you. He starts off as a bit of a stubborn jackass, only in it for the money, but even from the first chapter you get to slowly see bits of who he really is. A guy who's just forced to have been lonely after the death of his mother and being forced to live as a mercenary for so long. I mean, he's only like 21 in this game. The dynamic he has with Sherry is really enduring, and as you get to unravel their journey across the 6 months time skip in the campaign, I was really rooting for them to keep fighting on and surviving, whether it's Ustanak or the oncoming apocalypse, and coming to terms of who they are with their heritage as children of madmen who expose themselves to these dastardly bioweapons. And if I didn't already like Jake and Sherry's campaign enough, the fact that it ends with a charming love rock song completely won me over. And to be honest, the only truly big complaint I had of this game would have to come to the fact that I had to put on gloves to beat that one part in Jake's campaign where Ustanak is chasing you through all those goddamn doors. It was like a bad Scooby-Doo chase, and I've never had to put on gloves to beat a video game in my life. And yeah, that's pretty much the only roadblock I faced in this game. It's not as bad as, say, Code Veronica's way of not telling you when you have to switch characters and be sure to put, inventory in the item box. But in the case of Resident Evil 6, that was truly the only major critique I had, was that goddamn door section. Originally, I was going to critique the crosshairs in this game. the ones you start off with. But then I realized in options you can switch back to good old laser sight, which I thoroughly was happy about. Now I'd like to talk about Ada, probably one of my favorite Resident Evil characters, and if you're a guy, well, you know why. And all the women who are big fans of Resident Evil, they know why too. But what I love about Ada's first chapter is that it just opens up with her jumping out of that diving suit naked. It's the best kind of jump scare, a sexy scare. But the fact that this game really explores sort of who Ada would have become if she didn't have that good heart of hers. Because when it comes to Carla, she really is just what you would imagine an evil spy to be. Cold, calculating, and always has some sort of backup plan. And you gotta consider that all the bosses in the game came from Carla's scheming. Whether it was Chris having to fight House, who might have been the most destructive bioweapon in the series, should it have continued to grow, to Jake having to fight Usanak, who responded to Carla's commands, and it was clear she was one of the reasons he was developed, since she made the C virus in the first place, to Leon and Helena having to fight Simmons, who Carla infected personally due to Javo. And then when you come to Ada herself, Ada's the one that had to overcome Carla in that battleship fight. So it's pretty fascinating that when you look at all the Resident Evil villains, as I've talked about in another video before, and trying to create a villain that follows up on Albert Wesker himself, I do think that Carla's a worthy successor, because a lot of her plans almost succeeded, and she even took the whole bioweapon global war to another level, and it was almost became an apocalypse if you think about it. From the warheads containing the C virus, to battleships and entire armies full of Neo Umbrella Javo that can continue to evolve even when they take damage, to House sleeping at the bottom of the ocean waiting to awaken, and so many insane bioweapons of different sizes and abilities that can be deployed at any moment. I think that's what makes Resident Evil 6 terrifying in its own right. Sure, Resident Evil may creep out some people more than others, but for me, I think it just has a really genuine cool factor. And now I know that the whole survival horror aspect and the lack of RE6 having it is some kind of major criticism to the game. Even back in the day, from my research, it seems like there was some kind of mob mentality just ragging on the game, but I don't think that's a fair criticism when considering that not only are the characters that are returning so powerful at this point, but you have to do more to make bioweapons scary. Especially when considering that in the first place, Spencer and Umbrella were trying to make bioweapons. And when we get the RE6, we truly get to see bioweapons on a different scale that we only get hints of in the past. From RE5 and the new Plaga Outbreak, or Revelations and the Terra Grigia Attack, little bits that we get to see fully realized here in RE6, all over the world, from Adonia to the US to China, and secret underground laboratories. And whenever I look at Resident Evil 6's cutscenes and narrative, and the gameplay, one thing that truly stuck out to me is the bleakness to it. From Chris losing his team twice, to Leon and Helena being helpless to witness the warhead go off and infect so many innocent people that moments ago we just saw making their way to evacuation. It goes from melancholy to a terrible bleakness of something that cannot be stopped. I mean, for Pete's sake, if you look at the Tall Oaks attack alone, as the infection spreads, so many survivors get taken out. Especially the Cathedral fight, where if you don't act fast enough, then pretty much every random civilian in there can get infected. There's such a bleak feeling to the game as Carla expresses her rampage, that when it comes to Ada finally taking her out, it feels so cathartic. And I love how the game juxtaposes Carla's ruthlessness to Ada's genuine humanity. Because whenever I see fans kind of label Ada as being heartless, I just don't think that's true. Sure, she's doing her job most of the time, but what makes Ada interesting is that she has a such a good-natured part to her, that she does want to help people, and she'll even step out of line to do it, from saving Leon and RE4 and sticking it to Wesker, to what we see in this game where she tries to help the people on the rooftop and just get to the bottom of why her name is being misused by a doppelganger. And Ada Wong is a great example of why fans love femme fatale characters, because they're a great, strong case of strong, positive femininity, just like Catwoman is. And having the same writer from Damnation once again does pay off here, because I just love how many different layers are given to Ada. And man, Courtney Taylor's performance as Ada is incredible. I love how she also adds some small touches to Carla's voice too. But when it comes to Ada, I love how she performs her voice, the direction, just the sort of cadence she has to her. It's very spy-like and Catwoman-like, and it really does a nice job building off of Sally Cahill's performance. And I adore that a lot of Ada's lines in RE6 are repeated in Dead by Daylight whenever he plays Ada. It's such a cool touch to just see these lines brought back in some kind of modern game.
Wanna play, huh? Alright. Ready or not, here I come. Now, who's first?
As I said earlier, Resident Evil 6 truly tests the limits of all these beloved characters, and it's part of why I think this is such an ultimate Resident Evil experience, because you get so many callbacks reimagined in such a proficient way, and you actually get to see these characters confront parts of themselves that we haven't seen before. It truly felt like Resident Evil had a story that was building off, a story that already reached such a big climax in Resident Evil 5, and I love that RE6 is able to pick up the pieces and continue telling a story of other parts of the franchise that were overlooked, such as the corruption of the US government. And we get to see that as Leon gets to fight Simmons head on after being forced to kill the president. And the way that Simmons not only challenges the whole US corruption causing most of the events of this franchise, I like that he also serves as a way to challenge Leon's commitment to Ada. Because of course we know the romance between Leon and Ada is strong, since they both pretty much saved each other back in Raccoon City. And it's also kind of a nice parallel we see of Jake and Sherry, but the fact that Simmons is such an antagonistic force that directly tries to hurt Ada and Leon has to save her, I just found it really touching. It's a sort of emotional pull that I was really happy this game touched upon. And I think if Resident Evil tried to do more of that, it'd be for the better. Because I feel like Resident Evil 6 really challenged the characters, from Leon and Ada fighting for each other to Jake and Sherry finding solace and both of them being these outliers, to Chris becoming a hero again with the help of peers. I just think there's so many elements in the story that, well, sure, a lot of it is still told through text that you have to find, and let me quickly talk about that. Although I was a little bit disappointed that you can't just go up to an environment and hit a button and the character will kind of remark about something like past games, I do enjoy now having a different incentive, as in looking around the environment to find those serpent emblems, to learn more about different subtle details in the story. I think it's a nice way to kind of update old systems in Resident Evil while still giving us an incentive to explore the environment. Because I do think that every Resident Evil game still has quite a bit of its plot told through text and files and what have you. But whenever Resident Evil 6 does dive into the cutscenes and the heart of the story, I think it excels on all fronts. Sure, the overall concept of the narrative may not be the best, but I think that a lot of stories can still excel even if the whole plot idea isn't strong, because it's the character interactions that really pull through and keep me engaged. As with Yakuza 5, and I'm bringing up Yakuza 5 again because just like RE6, both of these games have a bit of a mixed overall story narrative, but the character interactions are so good and they build off of previous lore that I really just adore being able to jump back into these universes that I love, these games and their unique characters. And yeah, I think Resident Evil 6 does a stupendous job just making these characters feel alive, even if their own pitfalls, and seeing them rise to the top and becoming, well, better people. I mean, isn't that what survival horror is all about? Overcoming this great opposing terrible force and becoming a better person due to it? Facing your fears and growing because of it? Well, I think so. And with that in mind, I think Resident Evil 6 is no stranger to, well, being a Resident Evil game, because it is a Resident Evil game. There's no doubt about that. It has everything Resident Evil that I love. Insane action, creative looking monsters, and bioweapons, and characters that I love, that they're over the top in a great way, because I'd rather characters be a little over the top and endearing and charismatic instead of being bogged down by realism and just ridiculous and being just too, well, realistic and boring. And that's why I'm happy to say that I love Resident Evil 6, because it just feels like such a great ode to the franchise. The characters are bombastic, they go to incredible looking settings, and they have to engage with so many different adversities. And like I said earlier, I played pretty much all these games in a year, and when I came across RE6 and I had to fight that snake and shark again, I mean, it felt like a great culmination to this journey. And while I do look forward to playing the games that came after this, I just have this gut feeling that this was a true height of the franchise, as the characters grew in some way, and I just really, really wish that people didn't jump on a hate bandwagon, because it's never cool to do that unless it's actually warranted. And in the case of RE6, I just don't see that being warranted. It feels like a Resident Evil game, and that's why I just had such a great time with it. The gameplay is fluid, it builds off the previous games. There's even some nice callbacks to the fixed camera, as I'll show you right here.
Try to be quicker. Try to be quicker. That wasn't bad. That wasn't bad. Don't get cocky. Appreciate it.
A lot of things feel deliberate, is what I'm trying to get across. And I love that it just becomes such a beat 'em up arcade game. It's fun. I mean, goddamn, I like video games that are fun. RE6 feels like a product of its time in the best way. A time that I really miss, and I hope video games go back to it. An era that I fondly remember with games such as Transformers War and Fall for Cybertron, the Batman Arkham series, and Star Wars Force Unleashed. Games like that just go so hard when they have no business to, but except to be fun and genuinely enjoyable. If I had to close out Resident Evil 6 in some way, well, I think Leon and Ada's campaign has the best way of doing it. And Leon's ends with Helena giving Leon Ada's makeup case, and the fact that Leon says women with a smile in regards to Ada, it's so charming, and I think it's a great way of just making a callback work in such a new light. And I think that just really describes Resident Evil, that final women line. Just a game that kicks ass, is charismatic, has style and soul. A game that wasn't afraid to take some risks and just give people what they wanted, even if they seemed like they didn't want it for some reason. And although Resident Evil is a franchise that's always going to evolve, and I think it's a good thing, I think that Resident Evil 6 is the ultimate showcase as to why Resident Evil is always going to go back to action in some form. The franchise just can't escape being bombastic, fun, but also having some really creepy imagery to it. And I believe that writer Shitaro Suga truly understood that, and he delivered with his Resident Evil projects. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you didn't like this video, then well, let me know in the comments below, because I just love reading feedback, whatever it is. So again, thank you for watching. I hope you stick around, and please, if you do, stay tuned, because I've got more coming.
What took you so long? What took you so long?
I guess that was good. I guess that was good. I guess that was good.
Don't die on me!
That a mission so easy.